the UN Secretary General is a position that is made of qualities and compromises. So is this specific gentleman now to be in the office. Professor Toker, what do you make of this final compromise among all the members of the Security Council?
Well, I wouldn't get into the intricacies of the corridors of the UN building in New York because it depasses my capabilities, I agree.
Okay.
So I ask again, the CCTV viewers to pardon me for that. But honestly, I don't think it's important anymore once apparently the official vote confirming his nomination as UN Secretary General is about to take place in less than 1 week. And it is the General Assembly which we vote. So if there are no surprises, and usually there are no surprises in this kind of procedures, he's the next one. Now, what do I make in terms of balancing between quality and compromises? I would say that that's very much the tradition of the UN headquarters, and in a way, rightly so. Even I would even provoke perhaps the politically correct discourse and say that's fine this way. We have to understand that the UN is a very particular, even awkward sort
indeed.
of international body, the most important international body on the international scene, but which functions in somehow and often in an awkward way. So it's a fine balance.
Okay.
It's a fine balance between an experienced politician and one who has the experience on the terrain regarding refugees and humanitarian issues.
Got your point. What about you, Professor Wang? What about the qualities of this one, Mr. Guterres, to be the UN Secretary General? He's focused on refugee issues. He's focused on socialist political parties earlier in his career. How much is that going to equip him with the capabilities to be the UNSG?
Well, quality. Of course, he's a qualified leader. He led 10 years of the Commission of Refugees. This is an urgent challenge for international community. At the same time, he was approved by all the permanent members of the Security Council. This is very important. Other qualified candidates, like Bokova, also from Europe, is also her lady, but cannot accepted by the United States because accept Palestine as a member of the UNESCO. So, quality of course is important, but compromise among the P5s most important.
Yes, indeed. And now, this new Secretary General to be in the office is going to face similar challenge, if not more, of his predecessors. For example, how is he going to balance the interests between the one who has selected him or elected him into the office and the many of those who are vulnerable and he should speak for as the UN Secretary General? Very interestingly, we have several people talk about this leading up to his coming into the office. For example, the United Nations Director at Human Rights Watch, Mr. Luis Capono, he said this: the next UN Secretary General will be judged on his ability to stand up to the very powers that selected him, whether on Syria, Yemen, South Sudan, the refugee crisis, climate change, or any other problems that comes his way. And of course, that's only one of those quotes illustrating the complicated task this UN Secretary General is going to have. We are not, Professor Wang, in a very peaceful year. Not likely in the next few years to come. So this UN Secretary General is going to, is going to face wars, big power changes, refugee crisis, which is already evolving. So together with some of the traditional challenges facing the UN, what kind of strategy do you think when he comes into the office he has to focus on?
Well, yeah, dramatically, this is an uncertain world. No any single country, even authority can deal with the challenge. Even United States leadership also declining. So United Nations, this as the post-World War II international organization, also relatively declining, cannot deal with so many challenges. Today, it's not about refugees, so many civil wars, but about the billions of people joining globalization, industrialization. So the the traditional mechanism, international organization cannot deal with this. Most importantly, the old mentality cannot solve this problem. So the world is witnessing a dramatic change. The power division, transformation, many challenges. We just talked about the presidential campaign in the United States.
Indeed.
It's also
Unprecedented.
unprecedented. Two candidates also not qualified, to certify of their voters. So difficult choice.
Professor Toker, what do you say? For example, we've seen this UN Secretary General is likely to face once in a century or once in several centuries big power relations change. For example, between China and the United States, both of them are UN Security Council permanent members. Two of the P5s. And you also see unprecedented refugee crisis going on inside Europe, terrorism, and also relations among religion, relations among races. These are very much hot button issues that could suddenly erupt at any time. What would you say?
Well, I would say that unfortunately I cannot contradict any of the introductory adjectives you have used in your question in Beijing. You are right. We are certainly facing complicated conflicts. We're facing tragedies. We're facing present crisis, which may become even more complicated. We are facing also this unclear linkage between what we said earlier, namely the relations between the numerous, relatively weak or less powerful nations of the UN and the several few superpowers who actually try to make their voice and their policies advance. And all that is being channeled through and incarnated through the person of the UN Secretary General. Now, don't forget that neither the UN nor his secretary, its Secretary General, does not have any formal power in terms of classical power judgments and measurements. The UN has the power that its members would like to invest in him, and the Secretary General has or may have the power that the members of the UN, and mainly the powerful ones of them, would very much like or would not like to invest in him.
Well,
so the key word for that is pragmatism.
Okay.
The optimal Secretary General of the UN yesterday, today, and tomorrow would, I believe, be the most pragmatic one. He or she one day should behave in a particular way when it comes to in Iraq, in a different way when it comes to an African conflict.
Let's talk about pragmatism.
When it comes in conflict.
Yeah, let's talk about pragmatism. When we talk about pragmatism, we have something very concrete to hold on to. 17 Sustainable Development Goals. That has been a blueprint brought out to the rest of the world by the United Nations under the current Secretary General, Mr. Ban Ki-moon. So how will those blueprints likely to be implemented for the future? Secondly, UN experiencing its own reforms, while at the same time there has been debate about what the UN's role should be in today's world. So with all of these very concrete questions, Professor Wang, how do you think this UN Secretary General should answer those questions?
Well,
once again, a big question. Once again, a big question.
Secretary General of the United Nations has some power. The first power is the power of the ideas, legitimacy. United Nations, the most authoritative, international organizations for peace and security. No one can take the place. And secondly, is mediation power, to make a compromise among P5 and other members of the United Security Council. So if a weak Secretary General make the United Nations not so work, bypass even by the great superpower, as he mentioned. But it's under his leadership, he can mediate, can make a compromise. United Nations still can work. Particularly, United Nations focus on peace and development. As you mentioned, now many problems, peace, unstable, because of the poverty, because of the gaps between rich and the poor. So United Nations 2030 Sustainable Development Goal I think this is a great achievement of the last United Nations Security Council. And China and United States work together, let the Paris climate change deal also pass. This is also contribute to the world peace.
Will the 17 Sustainable Development Goals and, for example, the climate change deal between China and the United States and also many countries in the world be able to be encouraging enough for this UN Secretary General new coming into the office to rally the crowd and bring forward some of the new developments in your areas? Professor Toker.
Well, it would be too risky for me to say
yes.
A flat yes or a flat no. I think that it's part of that pragmatism we mentioned 2 minutes earlier. It would be one of the judgments, although we know throughout history and throughout the 70, 80 years of the existence of the UN and the previous League of Nations, that usually the prestige and the level of success of UN Secretary Generals are judged not according to social and climate type issues, but regarding real crisis in the classical sense, wars, tragedies, yes, huge waves of refugees, which unfortunately the planet goes through. So these will be the real judgments, and they're still already there on the agenda, and there will be new ones, unfortunately.
Okay.
But still, let's not forget in this cynicism and a bit of pessimism, the fact that on a larger perspective, never ever had the human race or planet Earth equipped with such an organization, which after all, in spite of cynicism, in spite of classical diplomacy, in spite of the game of interest, could make the difference when it really needs to make the difference.
Well,
this is a big progress, but on a very large scale.
I did read your optimism among the skepticism that you have been expressing. Having said that, though, my final question for both of you, 20 seconds for each, if you can. That is, what is next? Because there has been so much debate regarding who should be the Secretary General of the United Nations this time. There's gender debate, there's geopolitical debate, there is geographical debates even as to where they should from, and also there has been enormous amount of debate about the UN's future, who is most suitable. Eventually, this person, Mr. Guterres, what do you make of it? Professor Wang.
I think the urgent issue, challenges driven by 10 years service of the refugees agency. This is a top agenda, I think, in the United Nations.